Hi, in a previous video I removed the cab and I show that. If you want to just search for cab removal, then you'll see it. This one I'm going to cover some of the highlights of doing the head gaskets on the 6.0. The areas that people may or may not have questions on. I won't show every little detail, but I'll show the majority of them so you can see what it is. If you're looking for doing one with a cab on, I do not have a video of that. I don't know if I ever will make one because I've only ever done 2 heads inside of a cab. I've done hundreds of them taking the cabs off. And if I'm doing a van, I pull the motor out. It's just my way of doing it. To me, it's faster. But as far as doing this, first thing I want to do now that I have it apart is spray all my clamps and everything with some lubricant, penetrant, whatever you want to call it. I'll spray them all here, all the bolts that are exposed that I'm going to be taking off. We'll go ahead and spray them and get it ready for disassembly. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And on this one too, this one has the black, supposedly the black diamond head gaskets, and it has the ARP head studs. It either blew a head gasket again or something's going on. So this one I'm going to try to cover that. So I'm going to go ahead and spray everything here and get the stuff out of the way that I had tied to the engine from lifting the body off and start on disassembly.
Where you remove the belt, take the fan off. I just use the air chisel here. Just touch it. Knock it loose, now just take it out. On the down pipe, normally I'll take it all the way out, but this one being aftermarket, I can't get it out. So I'm going to go ahead and just loosen it up. I use a 7/16 deep. You can get them either at Home Depot or whatever. They work pretty good because they reach all the way down here with a 3/8 to 1/4 adapter. But on the exhaust too, I take both sides of the white pipe off as one piece. Don't touch this area. Just undo the pipes there, here, and take it all off. Just go ahead and loosen them up. Toss off on one piece once you separate it here. And be careful, these aren't for bending. You want to line it up. Don't be trying to compensate for them being misaligned by bending it here. They will crack if you treat these too rough. When we put it back together, we'll have it all set up like this and it should just slide right on. Just to keep the video from being too long and too much going on, if you're doing it in the cab, we'll leave this shield on, but since we have it out of the cab off, I'm going to take this shield off. I'm going to go ahead and just do the basic, pull the turbo off, the alternator, the belt, a few of the things that doesn't take anything special. When it gets tear down time for the heads, I'll cover that, and also with going back together, some of the things to look for. We'll show that. Once you have the wire loom all disconnected, we still leave it in the vehicle because of the cam and crank sensor. We just take it, all disconnect out the intake and turbo, and we'll lay it out and put it over here in front of the engine. Move it like that, move it over to the front of the engine, leave it in front of the timing cover. Remove the injector wire loom as an assembly. Even though you're going to have the heads off, you want to blow off all the dirt inside the intake, keep an old bolt, washer, or clip or something from going down inside. Take off the oil cap and the fuel lines, let them drain down a little bit and remove it as an assembly. We're using the O-rings here on the fuel lines for years without issue. Just make sure they aren't hard, stretched, or any other issues. Most of the time though, we reuse them without a problem. I usually leave the fuel line on the driver's side head, take the one off on the passenger head right now. The intake manifold, remove the valve covers. The head gaskets will come with a new standpipe back here, but it's a good time now before we remove the oil rails. Let's make sure that we have the 12mm up pipes, standpipes in here, and also this 12mm dummy plugs. If you don't, just replace them now. It's a whole lot easier to do it now. Also do a visual check, make sure there's nothing else loose in here. And another opportunity now for me to warn you, don't ever reseal the nipples on here. I never see a problem unless somebody's tried to reseal them. Then they have problems all the time. Same way with the injectors. Don't touch the internal injector seals. Lift the oil rails off, leave them up here to drain for a second, pull them off, then hold them up or set them above to drain. Otherwise you'll have oil all over the floor. Usually I just pull them off and let them hang up here for a second. Let them rest up there and drain. I'm going to remove the head here.
The only thing I can suggest on it, or the only thing that might be kind of technical or tricky, is what you want to do is we'll loosen the bolts here for the pedestals here that hold the rock arms down. I'll loosen them up like maybe 3 or 4 turns, because if you don't loosen them, where the valves are pushed down or the rocker arms are pushed down, valves push, however you want to look at it, if we don't loosen them and we undo the head bolts, it'll pop the head off and also make a mess. So we'll loosen the 2 bolts that hold it down, but just loose, not out. Then we'll undo the head bolt. If we undid the head bolt first, again, it'll lift it up. And if we took these bolts all the way out, sometimes they want to rotate, and then you end up breaking your clips for the rocker arm. So the trick is loosen these 2 10mm head ones just a little bit, then undo all your head bolts, then we'll loosen these rest away and lift them out. So I'm going to go ahead and loosen them up and go from there. We've got the head bolts loose. We've got these just loose a little bit right now. I'm going to go ahead and take the bolts off up here on top of the head, cylinder head. Remove all these. And once I remove all these, we'll come back and take these rest of the way out. Loosen these rest of the way up and lift them out. Okay, just in case you're wondering, 11/16 12 point for the ARP, the nuts for the ARP studs, 11/16 12 point, and 3/16 Allen for to take the studs out. Okay, now this is where you get to make a choice. Normally, we just get in there, we do a head gasket. 99.8% of the time, you'll be okay. We don't take the injectors out, we don't separate the top and bottom, we don't take the manifold off, never have an issue. We just lift the head off, do the head gasket, put the head back on. Twice over the last 10 years, I've had 2 carriers leak, and if this carrier, your aluminum part up here, if it leaks, you have to go and lose a head gasket, pull the body back off, and do it again. After eating the second one, we now take and separate the carrier, the top of the head, from the bottom part, clean it off, put a little bit of silicone on it, and reassemble it when we go back together. So you're going to see me take it apart to do it. Also, there's going to be a lot of different designs. You'll have some that'll have bolts in it like this. You'll have some that'll just have 2 bolts. You'll have some that won't have any bolts because they don't fit. You'll have some that'll have empty holes, filled holes. Don't worry about it. None of these bolts that hold the carrier to the head matter. Head bolts alone will work. If you can get 1 or 2 bolts in up here, that's good. If you don't have any, don't worry about it. The carrier still seals. Okay, lift this off. Got all the studs out on this side. Lift the head off. We got a head gasket issue here. Failed there. Pretty much is about the only place so far. Check the other side. We've got a little bit down here, mostly here against the head. You can see right here where it let go on the head. Head gasket failed there. You can see everywhere else where it's sealed. Right there. Let's check the other side. This one looks a lot better. Just
done on the other side. That's all it takes is one place. Okay, a couple things you want to do. We're going to rotate it here. And as we rotate it, we're going to get the water out. But one of the things you want to look for is the cylinder wall scoring. We want to look down the side here, make sure that it's good. And then also on top of your pistons, focusing everything, so one of these. What you want to do, if you ever have one that's running rich or have issues with it, it's almost always deteriorates or fails right about here. Now another thing too, you see guys that say that this is from a programmer. I'll see those on stock trucks. So it's not that star pattern, I see them on stock trucks. But what you want to do now is rotate it around and start looking at all the cylinder walls, all the pistons here inside the combustion area. Make sure the pistons travel to the top and that your cylinder walls aren't scored or have excessive bluing or damage from running hot. There's light scoring in here, but pretty much a rule of thumb, if your fingernail doesn't catch on it when you have it, then it's okay. So when you see the scoring, look for discoloration or any transfer from it starting to seize, or just run your finger across it and see if you can feel it. If your fingernail catches, you've got damage. You're going to be losing compression, combustion. If not, then it's safe to probably use it again. Okay, I have the head off here. What I'll do is I'll try to cover what Ford says and what we do out here in the industry. So maybe it'll help you. You can either know the right way or what we do and what works for us. Hopefully it helps out. Some of the things that I can warn you about. If you look here at the surface of the cylinder head here, they call it RMS. It's the machine surface of it. You actually want that to be here. It's kind of like a record. It helps to hold. It kind of grips your head gasket, and it works. If you take stuff like these grinding pads or even a razor blade and start to dig into it, then you're going to damage your cylinder head. And if you gouge it, or you're using here, because these things, they're abrasive, and start scratching it, realistically what we're doing is taking little channels and digging it out here. And once you've done that, as the compression keeps coming up in here and you have those little channels, it gives it a way for it to start to erode or damage your head gasket. Ford wants you to use like a plastic spatula or use something else here to clean it, a softer metal, so you don't damage the head. In the real world, if you do use something like this, you want to make sure that it's dull so it doesn't damage it, or if you just clean it off. If you use a razor blade, you got to be careful, get a new one, try to use it straight up and down. Same thing, if you gouge it, you ruin it. You go to a machine shop, we've had them before where guys will put a mirror surface on it, and I've seen those head gaskets fail. The correct way, Ford would tell you don't machine them. It's because they want this RMS to match. So, if you can, if you put other stuff on there, that doesn't mean it's going to fail instantly if you don't do it this way. But for your best results, I'm just trying to say, if you clean it, it's good and you won't have any issues with it. Also, Ford no longer wants us to take it and go the whole long way of the head and measure it. They used to have it that way where, like everybody else, you do an X pattern across it here, and you get you check your head that way. They've lowered the specs down to 4 thousandths now, and they want you just to check it along the edge crossways. So once you have it clean, just take it, measure it, just take it here. I have it 2 thousandths. That's half what they suggest. And I have it on there, and you can't tell, but it's stuck on there, so I know I don't have warpage. So we'll just check the head along there, and I've never found one yet that's been warped so bad that it fails the 4 thousandths sideways like this. I can't even find one that fails 2 thousandths. Also, what you want to do is just look for cracks. Every one of these heads, if you send them out to machine shop, they're going to come back, oh, they're cracked. That's normal. They all crack a little bit. We need to see cracks all the way through. And that's extremely rare to have cracks all the way through down here in the combustion area. Most of them, they're fine. You just take them. If you're just doing them for gaskets or high combustion temp pressures in there, you're just going to need gaskets on 99% of them. If you have diesel fuel in there, I have another video on that, and then you have it cracked up by the cups. But down here, again, you always have small surface cracks in them. Cracks all the way through are extremely rare on these. So one last thing I want to say is, if you are using a die grinder and cleaning it, don't sit there and have it at an angle and trying to clean this off, straight up and down like this, digging into it.
because if you get your surface uneven, then you're going to start having that 2 to 4 thousandths clearance, and then it is damaged. So again, nothing too abrasive, just clean it off, measure it, make sure it is, give it a visual inspection. That's what we've done on these things for the last 10 plus years, done hundreds of them, if not thousands, without issues. And the same thing on the block. When you clean the block, don't dig it, don't gouge it, don't scratch it. So let's go ahead and put this head back on, clean the surface off, and put the head back on.
Okay, we've got the block all prepped and cleaned. Now again, we rotate it, we check the cylinders. You want to look at your cylinder walls, make sure that you don't have any wear in there. You look around here, make sure that, because if you do have wear from excessive heat or excessive fuel, you have the damage inside here. Cylinder walls aren't scoring, pistons travel all the way up to the top. Pretty much we're ready to go. Blew out all the bolt holes, made everything's good, it all has good contact. So we're ready to set the head on these. Now, the people tell you to put it in a special position, the crankshaft and all that. Never ever had an issue with that. If you're worried about it, if you're worried about a valve making contact with a piston on it, which it shouldn't happen because the rocker pushes it in. The only way I can see that happening is if you didn't have something on straight, but as soon as you rotate the engine, it's going to damage it then. So I've never worried about that, but if you want to, just make sure you don't have any piston all the way up. And that way we have the valve clearance during assembly. But again, shouldn't be a problem with it because the cam timings, we're not touching it, shouldn't be off to make a valve and cam contact, valve and piston contact. So let's go ahead and set the head on here. Also, we don't use any cleaners. I mean, not any cleaners, I'm sorry. We don't use any type of sealant like copper coat or anything else in these gaskets. That's what's the superior to the Ford versus everybody else, is they redesigned this blue here. The sealing compound works pretty good. So I'm gonna go ahead and lift the head on and go from there. Okay, we have the head set on there. Once the head's set in place, I put these bolts in and I just start them to make sure that the head doesn't fall or give us any problems. Okay, just to show this again, because I've got a few comebacks over the years, actually 2, and after having to do the heads for free twice, learned not to do it any longer. But on this, we do separate the carrier from the head, and I'll clean it off and put a light coat of silicone on here, just to make sure that way I know I don't have a problem. The proper way, I guess I should say, is make sure you replace the gasket and make sure there's no gouges or anything else in it. But normally what we do is just separate them, and we'll put a small coat of gray silicone, and that works the best with these here. When you're doing the silicone, you just want to do a light coat. You don't want to sit there and take it and gob a great big old bead on here, because then you change the clearance. If you just sit there and put a small trace on it, just enough so that we have a little bit extra sealing, just in case we have any damages or any problems with it, then that way you're guaranteed pretty much no leaks. Now, another thing I want to cover on this one, this has the heads and the carrier being different. Again, the dowels, sometimes they won't line up. So this one we're going to help to use the glow plugs here to line it up, just because the dowels don't work on this one. So we're going to go ahead and do a coat of silicone on this one, a light coat, and install it. Okay, now remember again, on some of these, you're going to have them with the holes blocked, like here, where there's nothing there. You find some of the heads, they may even dangle over. See, there's nothing there. Again, none of that's, all the heads and the rocker carriers are interchangeable. There's at least 3 out there. There may be more. I know of at least 3 different styles. This one right here, not a single bolt will go back in, but that's fine. The carriers still get clamped down by the head bolts and be fine. I'm using the glow plugs to help center it. I can verify by looking down the holes and see that it's good, that it's centered, but just try to be careful, just focus on mostly getting your head bolts on, and don't worry so much about all the other bolts that hold the carrier to it. On this one, I'm going to be installing studs, so I'll go ahead and put the studs on now. But it doesn't matter which order you put it on, as far as if we do the studs or any of the other assembly right now. I just put them on, that way I know the head's not going to slip, even though I do have the bolts up above here helping to hold it on. I just want to go ahead and stick my studs on, then I can slide everything over it. Studs, you have coarse threads and the fine threads. The coarse threads match the head bolts, so these go down in the block. These, you don't really, if you want to coat them with a light coat of oil, you can. Not too much required on here. When we get up here and start to do the torquing, then you definitely want to use some oil or some anti-seize on it. And I am aware that the book says not to use anti-seize on it. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and put the bridges on now. A couple things I want to point out, because I'll get emails asking. This is typical casting. We see this on them. You see this going on through them. It's not cracking. You see them, most of them have it. It's no problem.
And again, the book will tell you to make sure that you keep these aligned. If you're worried about it, mark each one as you take it out. But what I do want to focus on, because I've had it happen to me a couple times, and that is where you bend a valve, is you have to make sure that your valve stem goes up inside each one of these. So let's go ahead and set them down and set each one on there. And it doesn't matter if you need to look at it 2 or 3 times, look at it and make sure that you get them on and it's on your valve. What I'm talking about, you can have them off and put them on like this. I've done it, so I know it happens. I've done it twice actually over the years with the stuff. So I've learned after the second time, I double check each one. So let's just check them, each one, be careful. Make sure you set each one on there. Okay, we're gonna go ahead and install the push rods. And remember, this engine's been apart before. What you wanna look for, if they have a copper tip, this is up. That's the only thing I've ever seen. But this one only has one with a copper tip. You can roll them and measure them, make sure they aren't bent or worn. Sometimes you see them worn where the head gaskets go through. Never have an issue really with them, but check them, of course. Make sure your tips aren't worn, the balls aren't worn, and install them. Now at first I'm going to just set them in here. There's holes inside your head gasket that make it so they go in the right way. So we'll go ahead and install these, and we're going to double check them before we do anything else with them. So install all your push rods down through the hole in the head gaskets. Okay, we've got all the push rods in. We have the bridges on. We're going to look at them again, make sure everything's good. You can get a visual that your push rod's down in between there. Now, nothing lubrication. We don't need any lubrication yet, but we're going to go ahead and just set these on here and lightly start the bolt. Again, we start the bolts because when we put the head bolts on, we don't want to twist it and end up breaking here your keepers. So we're going to get the bolts started. And then also, if we ran these bolts all the way down right now, it's going to push against the push rods and the valves and lift the head up. So all we're doing right now is starting them. On the 6.4s, we see these feet wear quite a bit. On the 6.0, they're not very common, but I should tell you, check them, make sure that they're all still intact. Everything's good at the ball bearing, no cracks. Again, you should have had a misfire, an uneven crank if it was an issue, but check it, make sure. And then if you do have excessive wear here, then you do want to replace the bridges. So inspect all your rockers, make sure they're good. Okay, if you're using head bolts and after you have the rockers on and the bridges, Ford will want you to take an oil soaked rag and just soak your bolt around the threads and around the bottom here so it doesn't grip on the head while you go on. One thing, if you are using oil, don't just get it and dump it on there, because if you have it dripping off of here and you just have oil running down, you put it inside that hole, all that oil is going to get inside the hole and give you a false torque. So don't over oil it. That's why they say just get a rag that's soaked with it and put some lubrication on it there and up here. And when you install it inside the head, as you torque it down, you don't want these two surfaces dry and give you problems. We're using the studs, so I'm going to take some anti-seize. And again, I know the book says not to use anti-seize, but I'm going to take some anti-seize and put it on both sides of the washer so it doesn't grip either here or on the bolt, and also around the threads, and install the head bolts. Okay, I don't know if there's any wrong way to do it, but other than you don't want to tighten down your rockers first and lift your head off so it comes off the dowels down here, we'll go ahead and snug these bolts up. And again, these are going to have the resistance from pushing down. So we draw the bolts down. The first thing I do is like to draw them down to say maybe 15 or so I get the head all flat and torqued. So I'll draw these down, torque them down to about 15, in the same way with all these 10mm head ones. Okay, I want to get the head seated. So a couple things I'll go over because people's always asking me about the torque on the injectors or the torque on all different bolts. Pretty much any 8mm bolt, I'm not going by the head size, the head is 10. I'm going by the thread diameter. So I've got an 8mm wrench, it's a 8mm bolt. All 8mm bolts are roughly, they're going to be 23, 24 as far as foot-pounds of torque. So what I'm doing right now, I've got my smaller torque wrench. I'm going to go ahead and torque everything down to the 23 foot-pounds. That way I have the head seated. Then once I have these done, I'll switch it over and I'll check my torque on all these. I'll get all these seated then. And then I can go ahead and continue on and do go ahead and torque the bolts. Now if I have head studs, with these head studs, we're actually going to go with a torque. When we're using the factory head bolts, then we do a torque to yield.
where we're going to draw the bolts down. We'll do the 23 first, then we'll end up going like the 50, then 85, and then we'll go a quarter turn each, which I'll cover here in a second just to make it. Now, as far as head studs versus bolts, we see here in the previous video or earlier in the video, you can have head studs, bad head gaskets. The head gaskets still fail even though you have ARP head studs. So ARP head studs not the trick. You can have good Ford head gaskets, the redesigned ones since August of 05 and up. And then with your regular head bolts, we don't see issues as long as the truck's not pushed. If the truck's pushed pretty hard, programmers, stack, towing, heavy loads, going up grades for 10, 15, 20 minutes, an hour, then yeah, we start to see head gaskets fail no matter what. You can do studs, you can do best head gaskets, you can do O-rings, anything, they all still fail. You can't take it, push it really hard and expect to tow with it and have everything nice. So I'm gonna go ahead and torque these down and then go on with the head bolt torque. Got the head bolts drawn down, so we just go ahead and torque these all. Okay, if you're doing head studs, the final torque value you want to have, the latest and greatest, we looked it up, is 210. I used to see them at 245, but the latest and greatest now is 210 foot-pounds. So we want to do that in different increments. We've already drawn the head down and we have it seated here at the, just drawn it down to the 23 foot-pounds. So now we'll go like in 50-degree increments and we'll torque these until we get to the 210. We'll just torque in any pattern, however you want to look at it, whether it's an X and slowly build your way out, or if you want to look at it as a circle and build your way out. We just don't want to be tightening these down and then draw your head down this way because you would cause the head to do this. And that's pretty much the rule of thumb with anything you're torquing down. You want to make sure that you draw it down, press it down and then slowly work everything out. So again, you can do round like a spiral, or you can just sit there and go like this and X it out. You get the same results. Now if you're using the head bolts, we want to draw them down in a couple, 3 increments, end up at 85, and then we're going to do torque to yield. Once you get all the head bolts drawn down to the 85, then we got to do them a quarter, 90, 90, 90. So what I do, let's say we have this torque down, I get it, so I've got it down 85. I'll come out here, I'll make a mark on it. And I'll take my socket and a breaker bar, and I'll turn it like this. The same thing, I'll go get them all done, then we'll go do it again, turn it, get them all one more, end up like that. So all my head bolts like that. That way if somebody calls me or my phone rings or something happens, I know where I ended up. Or if I get one halfway, I know where I messed up at. So again, once you draw them down to 85, then you put a line on them all straight up to 12 o'clock, then go to 3, 6, 9, and that way you remember where they are. And all your head bolts are done and you know that you've done them enough. So pretty much that should cover your torquing, your valves assembly, the carrier, getting it sealed up, different issues you may have with bolts and stuff. So hopefully that works, and now we'll go ahead and install the injectors are already torqued. So we'll go ahead and do the fuel rail and then the valve cover. Pretty much that should be it. Okay, I've got the head all torqued down. Everything's good there. Now it's time to put the oil rail on, or the fuel rail, whatever you want to call it here. A couple things I want to go over here because people is asking me questions. And I get dozens of emails a day, and I'm trying to just help you guys out here. More than just my opinion, because again, I just hear it all the time. 1 to 3 people a day complaining about it. Do not reseal these nipples. If you do, you've ruined your rail. I see so many that fail after somebody's touched it. I've been doing this every day, 10 hours a day, 5 days a week. So then do this hundreds and hundreds of times. Never seen this oil rail fail unless somebody's worked on it. Do not reseal this. They all move, they all do this. This is normal. You do want to make sure that it's straight up and down. Do not reseal your oil rail or throw it away. And also do not replace these injector seals. If you reseal your injectors inside here, they're junk. They fail. That's why I do not like and use aftermarket injectors, because I see too many of them fail. It's always this seal. It's always a no start hot, or maybe you go 10 miles, or maybe you went 200 miles. Then next thing you know, you've got either no start hot or no injection pressure, and it's always, I just resealed my injectors, or I resealed all the nipples, so it can't be that. And when it actually, no, it is because of that. So again, don't touch these seals in here. Don't reseal your oil rail, and you'll be fine. Also, if this is not a 12 millimeter, if you've got a 10 millimeter head on it, let's update your dummy plugs now. And then the head gasket should have came with the standpipes.
So the only precaution I can give you, make sure these are all straight going down. We're going to set this on. You want to set it on straight. When you put it on, when you go to push in injectors, we want it straight. We want to push down on it straight. So here I have it straight. We're going to push it down, and there we go. If I try to put it on at an angle and push it down like this, then my nipple is going to go and pierce the injectors and cause damage to it no matter what type they are. So again, set it on straight, do it. We're going to get the bolts in here, torque them all down, then do the valve covers. So hopefully pretty much that covers any of the questions that you may have for doing the head gaskets. I get a lot of emails, people asking me, and I've always hesitated making one because it's just long drawn out. But hopefully this answers your questions and helps you out. If it does, please like and subscribe. Thank you very much.